All right, good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining this morning. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, my name is Ben Sommers. I'm the Vice President of the Enterprise team at Color Genomics. Really appreciate everyone joining this morning. In my role at Color, I work primarily with organizations worldwide that are investing in the Color program as part of their broader overall health and benefits strategy. Prior to Color, I had spent actually the last 10 years of my career working with earlier stage, very innovative, high growth technology organizations focused on innovation in the healthcare space. So prior to Color, I had spent 3 years working in business development for North America at Fitbit, really working hard to bring wearables into the workplace. 4 years prior to that at Castlight Health, really working to bring increased transparency and awareness around healthcare costs and quality into the workforce. And I'm joined this morning by Jason.
Hey, nice to meet everybody. Thanks for coming to the session. Really appreciate it. My name's Jason Russell. I work in the Total Rewards function at SAP, so overseeing comp and benefits for North America. Been in that role for about 3 years, and I've had the privilege of putting in a lot of really cool, innovative benefits. So knew Ben from when he was at Fitbit. Still have my Fitbit from there, really I'm looking forward to talking about what we had done with Color. I think we have a really great story to share. So thanks everyone for coming.
Great, and so unlike maybe some of the other sessions, we really want this to be not so much a presentation as a discussion. So we're going to be taking questions not just at the end, but throughout. As folks have questions, thoughts, comments, please feel free to jump in. We want to make this really interactive. And so the topic for today is around innovating prevention through genetics, with an initial focus on conditions such as cancer, heart disease, and then what's beyond. So for me, like many of the folks that have chosen to join Color, my own family has been touched, unfortunately, by both cancer and heart disease. And so I'm just very passionate about the mission and the vision of the organization. And there's just so much in the world of genetics, and the science has evolved so much to enable us to get ahead of these really serious clinical conditions by leveraging the power of one's genes. And so we have a pretty brief two-point agenda here for this morning. The first is going to be focused on just what is the role of genetics when it comes to prevention today, and how is that changing? And then we're going to spend most of our time with Jason talking through just the case study that we put together from our launch going back to last July, and just some really exciting data around the impact that we've had with the Color program within the SAP North America population. So when it comes to the role of prevention in the healthcare system today, probably not a surprise to the folks here this morning in this room, 3% of healthcare costs nationally on average are spent on prevention. You see a quote here, often the system in the US is referred to as, well, here it's a medical care system instead of a healthcare system. Instead of medical care, another common term you might hear is it's a sick care system. We're really focused on treating folks after they've developed a specific condition, instead of preventing it in advance. And this is really the focus of Color. We think there's so much that we can do leveraging the power of one's genetics to get ahead of these conditions developing altogether or detecting them early. So for many employers, another common statistic we hear is there's such a small percentage of our employees, or maybe it's our adult dependents that are enrolled in our plan, that are actually driving a substantially disproportionate amount of our claims costs. And you can see in this example, it's 1% of claimants driving 30% of the costs in one's annual spend. Some employers we've talked to, it's 1% driving 50% of the costs. And what's in that bucket over here? What we found is in many cases, it's really those high-cost claimants, those million-dollar-plus conditions that have developed that are driving these types of statistics. And our thought is, how do we bring to the market what we call a precision medicine or precision health solution that instead of targeting the population at large with guidelines that apply to everyone, how do we actually bring a solution to the organization that's focused on the individual? Because if we're going to actually change the dynamics you see in this pie chart here, it really needs to be focused on helping the specific individual prevent themselves becoming someone who's driving this 30%. And so the question we ask is, what if your higher risk employees could understand their individual risk for developing these specific conditions, such as cancer and heart disease, and manage that risk better? So when it comes to how genetics kind of really unlock information and can affect this trend towards, again, catching these conditions early or preventing them altogether. It does start on the left side of the diagram here with the genetic analysis itself. And so we're focused on leveraging just an easy to get saliva sample to actually do the analysis. And so folks provide that sample with employers that we work with. It tends to really come into our lab in a couple of different ways. We do on-site events, which Jason will talk about, that we did at SAP to actually host tech talks with our genetic counselors to really work folks through or talk folks through why they might consider a program like this, help them understand the data that they'll be receiving and how it will be shared, and then the results themselves. So what types of analysis and results will folks get once we've done the analysis in our lab? And then everyone who goes through a program such as Color gets what we call a tailored risk management plan. And so this is such an extremely important part of a program like this, where folks don't just receive the results, but rather they have a conversation with a board-certified, trained, licensed genetic counselor to help them understand what risks have been identified, what is their personalized action plan that they should follow, and then here are the steps that are recommended to enact that action plan. We believe very, very strongly that it's actually irresponsible to provide folks information about their genetic risks without the opportunity to have that conversation with the genetic counselor. And then ultimately, the impact of all of this at the individual level and at the employer level is helping folks increase survival rates, again, detecting these conditions early or preventing them altogether, which ultimately also drives down treatment costs. Again, for folks in this room, not a surprise that if you're able to catch something such as cancer at stage 1, stage 2, the cost to treat that is substantially lower than if you catch it at stage 4. And again, correspondingly, the survival rates go way, way up. A quick example would be, many folks in the room might have heard of the Angelina Jolie story and her BRCA1 mutation that was identified and kind of what she did with that information. Like, what does that mean for the individual? Well, in a general population, a woman has roughly a 10 to 12% chance of developing breast cancer in her lifetime. However, if we identify that she is carrying this BRCA1 mutation, that risk actually climbs to over 80%. And so what that means is, again, there's a different plan, preventative plan that we would put that individual on to help them manage that risk. The really other important focus of a program like Color is all the things that we report on when it comes to your genes and your risk. Everything that we report on is clinically actionable. Again, going back to this notion of, we think it's irresponsible to provide folks information without having the conversation with the genetic counselor. It's kind of the same mindset that we use for not providing folks information about the risk for a condition such as Alzheimer's, where there's not yet medical consensus on what folks can do from a clinical perspective to manage that risk versus the conditions that we're focused on in cancer and heart disease. All the information that folks get once they receive it, again, it has an actual action plan that you can follow to mitigate that risk. So we found in all the research that we've done that more than 90% of folks that are carrying these genetic mutations are just not aware that they have this elevated risk. So why is that? Ultimately, it comes back to really three things. It's just awareness, accessibility, and affordability. And so again, when it comes to awareness, the notion of folks going through the process of getting genetic screening, it is relatively new, at least at a mainstream type of population level. Affordability, the cost of these tests historically have been many, many thousands of dollars to actually take these tests, and of course that has changed substantially. And accessibility, this is really a big one. Genetic testing has been around for more than 20 years, and you can actually get genetic testing through your health plan today. Most plans actually cover it. The catch has been access. In order to actually qualify for testing through your plan, you need to meet very stringent criteria, typically related to a family history, to then say, okay, I've got this family history, and now I can get this test covered. Going back to the breast cancer example, a woman might need to show that her mother had this, her aunt had it, and okay, then I qualify. But as Jason will share in just a few minutes, what we found when we launched this type of program with employers is usually more than half, in some cases more than 70% of the folks that we find to be carriers of these types of risks wouldn't actually even qualify for genetic testing through their plan. These are people that are completely slipping through the cracks today. So I think this is my last slide before I transition here to Jason so we can hear about his story. But quick bit of trivia. Okay, going back to your biology history, just shout out the answer if you know it. So this famous duo was the first to fully identify the double helix structure of DNA in 1953. Which duo? Watson and Crick. Excellent. And so the cost to actually fully sequence a genome back at that time was $3 billion. That has changed quite substantially. And so as we build this out, you can see that even just within the last 5 to 10 years, the cost to actually do this work from a scientific perspective and a lab perspective has come down so much that it completely has changed the dynamics of how we think about making something such as genetic testing available to a population at scale. So with that, I'm going to transition here to hear a little bit from Jason. Any questions from the group so far? Yeah, there's one.
Why is the cost come down? Like, what's driving that?
Yeah, and so the question was, why is the cost come down so substantially? A big part of it is improvements in technology. And so the next generation sequencing lab technology and robotics have just been, it's come such a long ways in terms of its ability to process the information and to do it so much more quickly. And then the other piece of it is really just operational efficiencies, like leveraging software and other technologies to kind of replace a lot of the work that has historically been done through laborious human intervention. Yeah, question in the back.
Yeah, so when the cost that you had up there, is that whole genome sequencing or just looking at certain aspects?
Whole genome, yeah. And even, I think in the last data point, it was maybe at $1,000 on that slide. That's even come down now into the hundreds. Yeah.
So
Okay.
is your product purely focused on coronary artery disease and cancer identification? Or if you do discover something that's not within those two categories, do you share that with the individual?
So yeah, the question was, are we solely focused today on cancer and heart disease? The answer is yes today. But there's so much more that's coming in terms of Color's product roadmap in new categories. So later this year, we're focused on healthy mom and healthy baby, and things like carrier screening will be rolled out later this year. And then also in the area of behavioral health, there's so much that we can do in terms of, it's a kind of a mouthful, but a new emerging category called pharmacogenomics, where based upon your genes, we can ensure that you're on the proper medications for specific conditions right out of the gate. Yeah.
Whereby you can probably go to like a Walgreens or something and just pick up a kit and be able to.
Yeah, how close is this to being available in Walgreens? You know, it's a good question because there are consumer genetic tests, on the market today. Folks have probably heard of, Ancestry.com, 23andMe. Color is a bit different in that all of our tests are physician ordered, and our focus is not so much on like traits and fun facts and family lineage, but again on clinical risk for clinical conditions. So it's just a different use case. I think for the foreseeable future, something like Color will still flow through that physician-ordered process. So thanks so much for the great questions. Let's keep them coming, but I want to make sure we hear
Keep
from
it
Jason.
moving.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I guess the backup, to just give a little background on how my organization ended up engaging with Color. We launched in July of 2017. About a year prior to launch, Color had reached out. They had heard about a program that we offer to our employees called COPE. It stands for Corporate Oncology Program for Employees. And what that is in an event that an employee would have been diagnosed with a solid state tumor, an employee could have a biopsy done, and then that tissue sample would be sent off to a lab, and using SAP technology with a third party, we would be able to do a sequencing of that and look to see, basically build out a treatment plan for that employee based upon a lot of the latest scientific literature. So really useful in cases of rare cancers, right, where maybe the treatment's not necessarily like very clear cut. So Color had read about that and said, hey, we have a program that we think might benefit you and might complement what you're already offering. So we engaged with Color about a year prior to this past July. And really, what I like about Color is it really hit it on 3 areas that we look at when we're looking at putting a new benefit or an enhancement around our core. we ask ourselves, is it going to be something that's impactful for our employees? Will it have that big impact, or will it be something that our employees will engage with? We also look to see, is this innovative? Our employees are constantly dealing with, machine learning, blockchain, Internet of Things. Stuff that's really leading edge, and so that we can, help our customers think through that. So we look to see, well, is this program going to be, from the perspective of our employees, is it going to be something that they perceive as innovative? And then also, we look to say, is this going to be scalable, right? Is it, to Ben's point earlier, is this something that we could roll out to everybody, or is this something that, really wouldn't work for our broad-based program, which, is obviously what we'd want to do. So, we hit I think the color program, you'll see it kind of hits on all three. So, we ended up, moving forward with it. And what I like about color, if you just look at the organization, and as I go through my portion of the presentation, you'll see that they really do a good job of taking something that's really complex, the human genome, genetics, genetic medicine, and they really simplify it for employees so that it's consumable. We at SAP are trying to run simple. That's kind of an operating principle that we have internally. It's also in some of our marketing campaigns about taking things that are complex, like ERP systems, cloud, data, and making it simple so that our customers can focus on running their businesses. Similarly, we like to partner with companies that can keep it simple, that can present to our employees solutions that can really resonate with them and really be impactful. And you'll see that the material that Color developed to help us launch really kind of hits the nail there. So really good alignment in terms of cultures and in terms of the program. I guess you should go through, how does it work? So what is the program? This slide just kind of workflows, it takes you through that. It starts with an employee just ordering the kit, so they log on to the SAP Color website. They log in there, get the kit shipped to their home. It comes in a nice light blue colored box. You open it up, and it really a test tube in there with a barcode on it. You just need to link that to the account that you create. You can provide all your family history if you want. You don't have to. You can just go in, put the serial number in, and then it's really just a little bit of saliva they need. It's not the whole tube. I think I was able to fill it up with maybe a minute or two. It's just the bottom of it. You seal it back up, put it in, and drop it in the mail. So that piece is really simple. If you can go on and your employees can order off of Amazon or do Facebook, they can order a color kit. And then Color delivers the results within a few weeks. So as Ben talked about earlier, for us, the big piece in here that's most important is that counseling, because in the event where somebody's getting positive results, which is really negative news that they're getting, without that engagement with the genetic counselors that help employees walk through, like, what do you do now? How do you engage in in the healthcare system? Who do you talk to? What questions you ask? What should your action plan be? Without that, it's really from my perspective, not a good solution, right? So that piece, from what I've heard, works really well. I did have 2 employees that had positive results. One I knew personally, and one I didn't know. I'd reached out and said, the news was kind of negative. The way that I was kind of walked through the process is really, really valuable, and really appreciate knowing my risk. So that piece is huge from my perspective. But it is ultimately getting the employees with this elevated risk engaged in the health plan. And then what I like about Color is they provide ongoing support. So I had taken the test, and I get newsletters from Color on latest thinking and trends and research in the genetic space. And then we have the genetic counselors in the event that somebody reads about something or has an ongoing question. As long as we have the relationship with Color, somebody can reach out to a genetic counselor and have their questions asked. So really easy to engage with Color. And then we officially launched in July 2017. Well, I should back up a little bit. So we probably started engaging with them the summer before. And why I thought this was really cool, really leading edge stuff. I've been hearing about personalized medicine for years, and was finally at a price point where it started to make sense. But I was concerned, like, well, what happens if somebody has this test and then they go to get life insurance, or how would our medical providers work? So I did months of kind of research, talking to our current partners and then other companies in industry that were really big and weren't partnered with us, but just to get their perspectives. And I didn't have one company or one person come back and say they didn't think this was a good idea. Everybody said, this is really interesting and really good. In fact, one senior actuary I talked to said, in some ways, this can help, from just a population health standpoint, can kind of lower risk because you now have people that are able to take action on things that they wouldn't have known about otherwise. So I got the green light from everybody I reached out to, which I said, you know what, this makes sense then. I don't have anything that I need to be concerned about on my side, not fitting in with everything else we offer. So we did launch July 2017. We had, the way we offered the program, it was available to all 13,800 employees that were on our health plan and independents over the age of 18. That's just a color guideline that they set, and we said, well, it makes sense to stick with that. So essentially everyone covered on our health plan. We didn't extend it to people not on our health plan, just to keep costs down. So when we launched for the first 90 days, we had it, the price set at $19. We had it set, we wanted employees to have some skin in the game since it's their health. We wanted them to kind of own a little bit of that. SAP did significantly subsidize this. As an ongoing basis, it's at $49. So we're still subsidizing it going forward, just not at the price that we had it at launch. We did that to push engagement. But at $49, I still think, that's probably dinner for one person out in New York City, right? Still an affordable price point for employees. So we did spend, I spent a little bit of time on this slide. We did spend, I should back up. At SAP, we tend to get very high engagement with programs that we offer, that are supplemental to our core medical plan. And with Color was no exception. I think we do a really good job at launching things. I think the approach we take is to anything that we can launch outside of open enrollment, we do. For us, we are open enrollment early November. And we just find that that's a really hectic time of year in a software industry, and enterprise software in particular. Q4 is a bit busy. People are trying to close deals, close the year out strong. Also, you're right on the cusp of Thanksgiving, New Year. So we really try, and you see we launched in July, push anything we can outside of that open enrollment period, to take that approach, because we tend to get much better engagement. And we also do we have the official launch that goes to our employees, but we do almost like a soft launch that we do internally within HR, so that when we send out the initial launch to employees, our HR colleagues are able to reinforce that with the business. So we educate our HR direct number. That's no matter where you're at in the world. If you have a question about your benefits, that's the number, your first point of contact there. So we have a launch for that group, so that when they have employees calling in saying, what is this all about? They immediately know, okay, yeah, well, this is a new program that was launched in the US. We also make sure that, in addition to my team being fully aligned, we make sure that our HR BP leadership is aware. There are touch points into the business. So we did a launch for them. We had Color come on and do a webinar. And the first webinar that we had, I had heard after the call, we had HR BPs that were trying to do screen prints of the materials because they just were so fascinated with this program and wanted to make sure that they really drove the message home with their leadership. So that was something that we find that when we do all this work behind the scenes before the launch, it really helps that when the launch happens, there's that HR is ready there to kind of reinforce it. So it's not just a TR thing. We also spent a lot of time building out a custom workflow with Color that I'll speak to a little later. And that just helped to really show our employees the value of what SAP was providing. Because at the end of the day, my team's just administering this stuff. It really is an SAP program, and we want it to come across as such. And then when we actually launch, for us, we have a strategy of every month we'll send out a TR newsletter. We intentionally keep it one page so that it's simple and easy to consume. And then if we need more than that, there's the link to the portal, to our intranet, so you can learn more. So that's usually how we officially launch anything. Sometimes we'll get leaders to get out a message before our launch, but not always, depending on how busy they are. But that's something that our employees know to read and take a look at. And then we follow it up with, in the case of Color, we had on-site meetings, we had webinars, we had blog posts, we did a little social media campaign. In our locations where we have digital signage, we worked with facilities to get the Color program up there so that it flashed up there in terms of just creating that awareness. And then just, sometimes we tend to forget about, but just like the brochures and things like that you can leave around. mailings to homes. I mean, that's something that, we're all in a digital economy now, but, I do find that, and we find that when you do send that postcard to the home, you catch, people that you wouldn't otherwise, because we don't have, spouses' emails, internally. So by, sending out the postcards, we've definitely, with different programs, we've seen that uptick. So, by building that in, it definitely helps to, increase your engagement. And then ongoing, we have, we brought color into this, we have Wellness Week. It's something that we have at our major locations within North America. We have one day that week where we have all of our partners come on site. And it really is, it does create a lot of momentum and buzz. And then we'll follow that, within that week, we'll have webinars as well. And then we have what we call people weeks across the summer months, where we'll have, different vendors come in and speak. And, we work color into that. So, a lot of, the point is, a lot of effort went into building the partnership, but probably more effort went into making sure the launch was effective. Any questions here so far? No? Okay. So this is just, a little bit showing, the on-site. The top right-hand corner is the color team, Ben and the genetic counselors out at the Newtown Square campus where I'm based. That's our sign in front of the building. The bottom right was when color came out. We have a big location out in Palo Alto, California. So it came on, had the Q&A sessions on site, and then we'd follow that up with webinars during the launch week. And then you can just see off to the left, you can see, relative to whether it was a mobile or a laptop. Again, the collateral from color was just really, really impactful, really easy to consume and engage with. And then this is I mentioned, this is, actually the brochure that was put together. So it was co-branded with Color and SAP. I think it did a really, really fabulous job of explaining the program in a way that was easy for employees to relate to and engage with. So again, I think it's taking the complex, keeping it simple so that employees can consume it and engage. Really, really positive feedback on the brochures and the collateral around the program. So this is the start of the custom workflow I talked about earlier. So in terms of getting to the site really easy, employee just logs into color.com/go/SAP, and then it takes them to this site here. To engage, all employees need to do is enter their email address and their birth date, and then that would log them into the site. So we directed employees here. And then you can see this is a screen capture of the workflow here. What I really like about this is you can see up at the top of the customization, very high, high visibility, 92% discount provided by SAP. So again, able to bring the program and the benefits of it back to the organization. And that shows, in terms of the review, shows what the employee is ordering, making sure that the address is right, and off to the right here, the summary, again, I think was huge. It shows what the kit sells for retail, shows what the SAP discount is, and then ultimately what the employee was paying. So, what I loved about the workflow again is it's showing that SAP is providing this to all of our employees, and it's going back to the organization. So, was it immediate? Given the effort that went into launch, we had really, really high engagement within the first week. We had 800 employees participate, so that was out of that 13,800. So really good week one launch. We immediately during some of the sessions, employees took to social media, getting the message out. So one woman who I looked her up, she works in communication, so she gave a shout out to Color and just how great she thought the materials were. I thought she might have been related to Bill McDermott, our CEO, but that was not the case. It would have been great for me and my team, but just has similar last name. But she, you can see she said, this is really great, clear, crisp communications, right, which is what we want, on the corporate side of things. Then we had an employee giving a shout out, going out to Life at SAP, holding up his Color brochure and just saying, how happy he is for the program. So in terms of the, just within the first 3 months, that $19 window where we were offering the, the really heavily subsidized program, we had just over 20% engagement, which, from my perspective, was, this is a huge success. This was a purely voluntary program. So, one of the questions I've had people ask me in the past was, did you get any negative feedback from people? That people say, oh, data issues, and I don't want my genetic information out there. Surprisingly, no. I mean, just given the size of our population, I'm really easy to get a hold of. I mentioned we send out a newsletter. I mean, our email is right there, so someone can very easily email me. During open enrollment, my name's out there a lot, so I just go into the directory and could easily reach out to me, or they could via that HR direct number, or someone could reach out to an HR BP, but no negative feedback at all. Which presently, I mean, I was pleased. It told me that this really resonated with people, and I think because it was voluntary, because we're saying, hey, if you want to engage, you want something innovative, here you go. But if you don't want to, that's fine too, because we made it that way. Employees didn't feel threatened by it, and with 20% engagement within the first 3 months, in our mind, that was a big success. So in terms of the breakdown, about 49% of the people that engaged were female. I think our female to male ratio is in the high 30s. So a lot of spouses, I guess, had engaged to push that number up a bit. Average age of about 43. That aligns with our average employee age. So what we'd expect, and then from our non-Caucasian workforce is about 35%. So we were aligned there, just in terms of the demographics. So relating back to that first 3 months, the question is, well, how many people tested positive? So there were 196 people that had tested positive for a genetic mutation with, that are linked to higher risk to cancer. So about 6% of those that had taken the test. So this slide here, it's a little busy, but I think it's an important slide. What this is showing, so these are the genetic mutations that link to that 196. So these aren't just random samples. These are actually the genetic mutations for that 196 people. And it shows you the different genetic mutations along the bottom axis. And then you can see the color-coded bars are showing you the link to the risk to cancer, right? So if you take the BRCA1 mutation right there, it's the second one from the left. You can see for those who have that, right, in the general population, you would generally have a 10% chance of developing breast cancer if you were a female. In the case of people who had tested positive, that's an over 70%, actually over 75%, risk of having developed a lifetime cancer. Similarly, you can see if you just move next to that with the for those that had the same genetic mutation, the risk for ovarian cancer, right? 1% in the general population. You can see it's well over 50% for those that have this mutation. So really, really important information for people to know that have this risk. Kind of dissecting it a little further down. So for that 90-day launch period, there were 3,200 test results released. I mentioned 196 that were identified at 6% of having that higher risk. And then of that 196, if you break it down a little further, there were 107 that would be characterized as moderate to high penetrance, meaning they're at the most significant higher risk. And of that, if you break that 107 down, based upon current cancer guidelines, 75% or 70% of those, they'd have no way of knowing, until they would actually have developed cancer, right? So based upon current screenings, without our program, these 70 people would not have known their risk. So I think that, from my perspective, I mean, this is one of the the key drivers behind putting a program like this in place, is helping employees manage that risk. And then if you break that number down even further, you can see 44. So these are those that are taking that 70 and breaking down even further. So those are the most high risk. 44 of those people would not have known about their risk until they were diagnosed with cancer. So in terms of, I know a lot of people in here probably work in the benefit space. When you look at that high cost claimant report, how many of those are cancers that are late stage, right? I mean, it's usually between that and your diabetes cases, the end stage renal failures. I mean, they tend to be your really just dominate your list of challenges in your high cost claimant. So if you're looking at it from an ROI standpoint, clearly if you can capture one or two of these, you can pay for the program. Anything beyond that, and you're if you're just looking at it from a financial perspective, which isn't like how I like to look at it, but if you are, there's definitely an ROI in there. So, because of the, just the impact that this has on people, I mean, they are getting negative news. Again, I think it goes back to those genetic counselors and having them there to, talk through the results with people. I mentioned, 2 people that had reached out to me regarding like this piece of it. So critical and such high positive feedback for it. So I wouldn't have known this until we'd actually gone live and saw how this played out. But it was really great to hear that really positive feedback on something that, for a lot of people can be a little troubling, right? So it's great to have that positive feedback and to have that set up with color. So I'm sure that this slide is not surprising for people. So just looking at some of the the cancer survivor rates, I'm sure many of us know that, in the case of early stage detection, survival rates tend to be much better, as well as cost, right? If you can catch cancer earlier, you can definitely treat it and hopefully beat it at a lower cost, right? So this is just kind of showing that relative to some of the cancers that color screens for. Definitely early detection and engagement is key in keeping costs down and keeping people alive and healthy. So in terms of feedback, I mentioned a couple people had reached out to me, but there are other people that were really out there pushing the message. We had one man that had reached out and said why he was alarmed that his to find that he had a genetic mutation. He really appreciated knowing that he could engage with his family and make them aware and be proactive about it. We also had an employee that, I think it was in the location I was at, Newtown Square. He learned about their program. He was running around like an unpaid ambassador at lunch, running all the tables, trying to get people engaged, talking about how great the program was and how we really thought that people needed to engage and learn more and, spend the $19 to learn about their risk. And then we had one employee out in, I believe it was in Palo Alto, who he was just so excited and enthused by the program. He ended up bringing his wife into the office, which doesn't typically happen. When we have our on-site events, they're generally just employees that attend. But he ended up, I guess, as long as he checked his wife in at the front desk, and got her badge, we're good. So it was just great seeing that engagement, though. He had, not only got his wife involved, but I heard he went and got kits for his whole family that were over the age of 18. So the point is, a lot of positive feedback, a lot of enthusiasm around the program. We did get picked up, and with launch, there was a Fast Company article right around when we launched. So there, SAP, along with a lot of other great companies, were mentioned in terms of just great unique benefits that are often. We don't have pet cloning yet or massages on site, but maybe someday. My dog's getting kind of old, and I don't know if I'd clone him anyway. But I think point is, it is something in terms of differentiating your organization. And the war for talent, right? I think offering something innovative or and impactful is definitely a way to attract and retain talent. So I mentioned I had nothing but positive feedback on the program. So it was nice to see some of the positive press coverage. That again, here goes an employee taken out to to social media unprompted and just saying how thankful she was for the program and for SAP offering it to all of our employees, all my colleagues. And then in terms of next steps, so we did launch as of July with color in the U.S. We are in the final stages, I believe, Ben, of finalizing our contract to expand the program to Canada. So just working out some of the details around getting things through border security and things like that. So. But by the end of this year, we'll have rolled this program out to all of North America. So really excited, and I guess at this point, open up the questions or comments.
Can you talk about the other conditions that you can use the test for?
Sorry, are there conditions that you can use the test for?
Besides cancer.
So yeah, again today it's focused on the 8 most common hereditary cancers, and then in the heart disease category, what's included in that module is hereditary high cholesterol, and then other specific heart-related conditions like arrhythmias, long QT syndrome, cardiomyopathy kind of fall in that category. Those are the products available today. And then what's coming in the future is, again, the Healthy Mom, Healthy Baby module will be coming later this year, and then focus on behavioral health will be fast following. Why the future product modules are interesting and important for employers is that SAP launched with a focus on cancer. Some employers have chosen to launch in more of an ongoing subscription model. And so as these new modules are released, the employer and the employees have ongoing access to new stuff as it is released.
Do they have to do a new test?
So yeah, do they have to do a new test is the question. And so it depends is the answer. When folks actually sign up for Color and create their account, they have the option to let us in our lab retain their original sample or destroy it. And so if they've enabled us to retain it, then that's of course a key input as to whether or not we can use the same data for the new tests. The other dependency is the science, and depending on kind of what the new product module is that is coming, can we use that original saliva sample for that new product module? So it does depend. There's two right here, yeah.
So when the results are done, are they emailed and then they talk to the counselor, or does the counselor call them with the results?
So great question. So folks get notification digitally that the results are ready, and then are prompted to schedule an appointment to have the conversation with the counselor. Yeah.
I know you said that there were some different measures that you provided once somebody was diagnosed. Apparently, the likelihood of it happening in the near future versus maybe further down the road or something. I wasn't very clear on that chart. To me, it wasn't very clear. So what happens if someone is diagnosed with the possibility of having cancer and then they get distracted and productivity goes down and they lose focus, and it could be devastating to learn something that may not happen for 20, 25 years even. So is there something like that comes through it?
Yeah, it's actually a really, really great question. So, how do folks kind of react when they get access to this information? Is there, a potential downturn in productivity because folks are now concerned? The way that we think about that is because of all the risks that we are identifying and bringing to the forefront for folks, because they are all actionable, that's a really important part of the story. So yes, folks might get this information and understand that they are at elevated risk, but because they now have something that they can do about it in terms of an increased screening or compliance plan that they're given to make sure that they detect it early or prevent it altogether, like that's a really critical part in how this information is received. We monitor through surveys our NPS, our Net Promoter Score, very, very closely. And kind of counterintuitive and surprising to me, honestly, not coming from the genetics background, what we found is folks that we do identify as being at elevated risk, they're actually the highest in terms of our NPS rating compared to folks that we find that aren't at elevated risk. And I think a big part of that is because, again, it's very empowering information, it's very actionable. And we've also seen research that has shown that once folks have it, yes, they might be initially concerned, but because there's a clear plan for them to follow, that's why the rating is so high for those folks.
Just one other question. Does the cost of the kit include the follow-up guidance?
Yes, so the cost of the program includes all the follow-on genetic counseling. It's just a flat per participant fee. The other thing we stress in our communications is it's not a diagnostic program. It's more, again, about your potential risk, right? And so it's something that might happen out in the future. Although it's worth noting, the cancers that we're focused on that are genetically hereditary, they tend to be earlier onset and more aggressive. And so actually, we're joined, I think, in the room by Parul, who heads up our enterprise marketing team. She herself is a breast cancer survivor. She was diagnosed at 31. She's 9 years away from the typical guidelines for even beginning mammographies. So.
And I think that just to follow on to what you're saying, the one key point is employees don't have to take it, right? So I'd say people are decidedly split. If I probably raise the room and how many people do it, you probably find some people that say, you know what, I don't want to know. Okay, you don't want to know, don't take the test. So.
So all of these tests are physician ordered. That's true. What if you have trouble finding your own physician? Does Color offer like an online tool for a physician to order for me if I put in certain criteria?
So great question. How does the physician kind of factor into the ordering process? Folks do have the option to provide their own PCP as the approving physician. If they don't have a PCP that they want to input, or they would just prefer to use Physician in Colors Network, that's an option in the online workflow. So we do maintain a relationship with our own network of physicians who can approve these orders. There's a couple in the back.
So you've taken the path from ignorance being bad and knowledge is okay, and then action is even better. And following on the other questioner who was asking what happens, do you have data around the percentage of people that have actually done anything different? Because I would imagine that just knowing is, I mean, it's not a bad thing, but unless people act differently, I would be just concerned that maybe this really hasn't done anything for them.
Yeah, so once folks have this information, do they then act on it? And so we absolutely do have data that we follow up with these folks via outreach from our genetic counselors and ongoing surveys to see, now that they know, what are they doing in terms of, increased diligence or on screenings and being compliant with the suggested screenings. What we found is really interesting. So folks, of course, that we identify at elevated risk are extraordinarily vigilant in terms of managing that risk and doing what they need to do. The other really kind of positive finding is even if you're not identified as elevated risk, there's still like general population level guidelines that you should be following. And so you might be a 53-year-old male who has not yet gotten your first colonoscopy because you just haven't gotten around to it. Or maybe you're a 43-year-old woman who has not actually gotten your first mammogram. We've also found that even folks that we've identified as not carrying a genetic risk, they also begin to be more compliant with their suggested screening plan because they've gone through this process and have had the conversation with the genetic counselor who has reinforced kind of what they're supposed to have been doing anyways.
Mm-hmm. Which was actually my follow-up question, since most people who get cancer don't actually have these genetic abnormalities. They have other ones that we don't even know about. So I would think that this general information and action about how to better screen and how to better prevent cancer through either nutrition or exercise or just awareness would be helpful. So that would be another interesting data point to look at, is how do you raise awareness and then action in the general population?
Yeah, it's a really good point because, again, not all causes of cancer are genetic related. I mean, of course, the ones we're focused on are. But is there an opportunity to kind of reinforce other things that folks might need to do from a lifestyle perspective to make sure that they also are taking preventive action? That's actually why we're really interested in partnering or even expanding into some of the traditional things that are done with employers today, like biometrics and health risk assessments. Like, I see those as very supplementary to the genetic part of the story. Like, you put those together and you've got a very holistic picture.
That was actually my question I was going to ask SAP. So are you guys doing biometrics? How do you see those data points all coming together for the individual? And is there a sort of well-being programs or paths that they can engage with based on this data they learn?
We do. I mean, we do on-site biometric screenings, so employees get that data as well. We do that during our health weeks. We also, been trying to really beef up our offerings in the health and wellness space. So I mentioned, diabetes, which is another big, big cost driver for a company. So we partnered a little bit before our partnership with Color. We partnered with Livongo as well to help, really help people manage that condition, right? Because it's really challenging, for people to manage, and that partnership does help. We also offer a nutrition program that we launched with Kerbo Health. So it kind of combines the healthy eating with that, with the human, that the coach, that combining digital with people to really help people stay healthy and ultimately manage their own risk. We don't with all the programs that we offer, we don't make people do anything. We offer. We say, hey, we think this is good for you to do, but at the end of the day, we step back and we say, it's your health though. We're not going to hit you with a stick or surcharge you for doing different things. It's we want you to manage your health, take it seriously, and be as healthy as you can, because ultimately that's going to impact the level of service we can deliver for our employees. That a person mentioned earlier, what happens when somebody's distracted at work, right? They're not performing. So, we think it's win-win. If we create that healthy work environment, ultimately you'll have employees that are better engaged, better focused. And we measure ourselves on it. So we do, we have a people survey every year. that we ask employees specifically, does your manager, does SAP care about your health? Are you healthy for your age? Is your leader demonstrating the behaviors that you would expect in your leader? And we actually, every leader gets a net promoter score. So it all kind of fits together to, I think, create a very healthy workforce. So we are getting people's information to them so that they can start putting all the pieces together to say, okay, am I taking the appropriate actions on my health, or am I not, right? And if they choose that, if the answer is not, that they don't want to do the things they should be, that's okay. It's their life, right? At the end of the day.
Well, I think we're about at time. Please join me in thanking Jason for presenting this morning.
Thanks for coming. I appreciate it.
And we'll be hanging out for a few more minutes if folks have more questions. So thanks.